It was the summer of 2015, and I had just gotten my first well-paying job at a gas station. It was one of the more bigger gas stations you'd see about halfway to a destination to stop for food or to use the restroom. While it might have not been the most exciting job in the world, it was definitely one that paid a substantial amount of money. For reference, I'm a female and was 24 years old at the time. I'm pretty short and weigh around 100 pounds. At the time, I didn't have a car, so I had to rely on taking the public bus to get to and from work. Since business was usually pretty slow during the night shift, my manager allowed me to chill out behind the counter if I had nothing to do. Sometimes you'd have your occasional 2 or 3 customers come in at around 1 a.m. for a late night snack, but other than that, the store was mostly dead. Most of the time, I'd be at the front minding my business, scrolling through Instagram and whatnot. It was a chill and great opportunity for me to catch up on my personal needs as well. One night, my manager had asked if I could work late as the guy working after me had suddenly quit and went to go make a living in watchmaking. Apparently, this guy obviously hadn't heard of a 2 weeks notice before, so I was livid to say the least. Whatever, it was extra pay and I couldn't afford to fall behind on rent. With me practically working double shifts at this point, I was running the store for long hours into the night. Some nights I'd have to bring my coffee to help keep me awake as the job could get boring pretty quickly. For the first few months, everything seemed to be going well, and I was even able to catch up on my studies. I had worked with my other coworker, Brandon, but we never really exchanged conversation as he mainly worked in the back. There was this one night, however, where something happened that little did I know would completely break me. I was working my usual nightly shift and I was cleaning up the floors after a customer had vomited from drinking too much. Once I clean everything up, I hear the door open and in walks a man with a backpack. He had a white beard and wore a dirty white tank top with cargo pants. I wave at him as a way of saying hello, and he then gives me an unsettling grin while looking back at me. I'm from the South, so it wasn't uncommon to see these types of people every now and then. He proceeds to grab a 6-pack of beer from our refrigerator and puts it on the counter, and I say hi once again. So, Ashley, what time are you out of here? Right from the start, this guy smelled like straight up weed and I could smell the alcohol in his breath. I nervously chuckle and say, 7. Ah, I see. Do you need a ride? I can take you home. I tell him no thank you and that I already have one and change the subject by telling him his total. He gets out his wallet and proceeds to hand me a $10 bill, making sure our hands touched. I give him his change and tell him to have a nice night, and he then starts to ask if he could give me a ride home again. I tell him no, and he grabs his beer, giving me a wave before saying, "See you later, Ashley." He walks out the door and I watch him get into his truck and drive off. He doesn't actually know when I'm off, so I figured I was out of the woods. A few hours go by and I finish up the remaining time for my shift before the person working after us comes in. I tell Brandon, who was still in the back, about what had happened, and he offered me a ride home so I wouldn't have to take the bus. Brandon and I walk out into the parking lot, and so far the coast seemed clear with no sign of the man. Long story short, he drives me home and I go to sleep until the following night. My mom had dropped me off at work, and I go in to see my manager standing there. Upon entering, he immediately comes up to me and says, "Ashley, is everything okay? How did you get home last night?" I told him that Brandon gave me a ride home, and my manager gets this confused look on his face. "Oh, that's weird because some guy came in just before 7. He said he was here to pick you up." A few months ago, I had just started working the graveyard shift at a Target in a big city on the east coast of Massachusetts. For reference, I'm a female and was 17 at the time of this story. I'm pretty short, about 5'6", and weighed about 150 pounds. The store happened to be located in a residential area that wasn't so great or safe. What I mean by that is that there would sometimes be break-ins and shootings once in a while. Let's just say the cops drove by several times a week. Because it wasn't as safe as most areas, there would always be a security guard by the front doors at all times named Chris. He was from Chicago and was a trained boxer, able to take on anyone who may pose a threat. My coworkers and I tried talking with him here and there, but he was mostly quiet and focused on himself. Having him there made me feel a lot more safe, as I have really bad asthma attacks and get frightened really easily. At the time, I didn't have my inhaler or breathing treatment with me, so an asthma attack would result in me going to the hospital. One night at around 8 p.m., I was doing my usual routine of scanning the merchandise in one of the sections of the store. As I'm putting away some shirts where they belong, I notice a man at the end of the aisle. I politely ask if he needed help, and he walks right over to me asking where the men's shoes were. I direct him to section C, and he then says, "You know, you're very beautiful." I smile and say, "Thank you very much," and continue to stock the remaining shirts. The store is pretty much dead at this point, as we don't get a lot of customers at this time of night. He thankfully goes over in the direction of the shoes, and I finish putting away the shirts. One of my coworkers, Hannah, comes over to me and asks me about the guy who I was talking to. I told her I didn't know, and we both go and get ready to clock out as we were getting ready to close. Hannah tells me to go around and check for any more people who still might have been in the store. For the most part, the store is practically empty, but I then found the same man still in section C. I politely tell him that we were closing, and he gives me this weird grin on his face. "Do you need a ride home? We can go back to my place." I tell him no and ask him to please leave the store and that we were closing. However, he doesn't listen and comes up to me and starts to grope me. At this point, I'm starting to panic, realizing what had just taken place, but knew I had to keep my breathing in check. I slowly turn around and walk toward the front entrance, telling Chris about what had just took place. Being the nice and kind-hearted person he was, he confronted him and told him that he wasn't allowed back in the store again. The guy showed no remorse and just stayed quiet while walking out of the store. Because I was still a minor at the time, Chris offered to stay behind until my parents came to get me. When they came, Chris had told them about what had happened and explained that he would inform the manager the next day. I worked at that store for another 3 months and only saw the guy once, staring through the windows. I still don't know what would have happened had Chris not been there that night. When I was about 19 or so, I got my first ever real job working at a gas station during the spring. It wasn't the best paying job, but it was enough to get my foot through the door to start making payments for college and stuff. I lived by myself in a small 1-bedroom apartment that my parents paid for, but got the job in the meantime to cover other expenses. My managers, being the jerks that they were, gave me a week of night shifts knowing I had a 7 a.m. class every morning. It was annoying to say the least, but I really needed the money. During the night shift, you'd have people constantly come in and out for gas, and right around the 10 p.m. mark, business would be slow for the most part. After that, you'd maybe have 1 or 2 shady people come in once an hour for a snack or cigarettes. That being said, it's still a pretty good time where I could chill out for a few hours. One night, I was on my shift as usual and had just finished serving what I thought was the last customer for the night as I was about to end my shift. As I'm packing up and getting ready to leave, a car pulls up right in front of the store and a man gets out. He wore a stained white shirt and had a scruffy beard with messy hair. He walks right in and I greet him with a hello and asked if I could help him with anything. He completely ignores my question and walks over to the refrigerators and grabs a 6-pack of beer. I live in the South, so people like this were very common around here. I tell him his total and he then says something that made my skin crawl. "Hey, you're really pretty. I love your hair." Laughing awkwardly, I tell him thanks and he proceeds to hand me a $10 bill, making sure our hands touched. I give him his change and tell him to have a good rest of his night and go on my phone, hoping he'd get the hint to leave me alone. He thankfully left and I waited for my coworker who was working after me to arrive so I could go home. However, he must have been running late because it was 10 minutes past his shift and I was getting a bit annoyed. 10 minutes turned into 20 and then eventually 30. As I was about to call him to see where he was, I then noticed someone hiding behind one of the gas pumps. It was a little hard to see, but because of the light, I could make it out to be the same man from earlier. I had no idea as to what he was doing, but I could tell that it clearly wasn't good. He then comes out from behind the pump, and I see that he's clearly hiding something behind his back, and I wasn't going to stick around to find out. I grabbed my keys and was headed out toward my car when I see him approach the front door, giving me this unsettling look. It was a look of hatred and fury. Suddenly he pulls out a gun and proceeds to show it to me as if he wanted me to know that he was armed. At this point, I'm frantically dialing 911 on my phone, and he then shoots the lock and steps inside yelling at me while having me at gunpoint. He orders me to give him all the money in the register or he won't hesitate to pull the trigger. I take a few deep breaths and calmly hand him the money we had, and he then takes off down the road. I call the police while bawling my eyes out in fear, and the operator tells me to stay on the line with her until an officer arrived. Thankfully, the guy never made it too far as police had managed to track him down. Turns out, this guy was wanted for sexual assault and murder. His victims were 2 family members, one of them being his wife, one widower, and 2 gas station employees. Just like me. The next day, I quit my job at that gas station and now work at my local supermarket.